Alright, so this is my main technique. I usually take the tops off of all three of them, so that way they're ready. What I do first is I take the lightest color and I go ahead and I fill it in. You know, just make sure that you keep it wet if you're going to be blending right away. You can go in and fill in everything of the same color, but just know that you're going to hit this again when you actually go to do the blends. So for right now, I'll show you how I do it just real quick. Get this filled in. You can use the larger side. It usually keeps things a lot wetter because it puts down a lot more ink. But I prefer blending smaller things at this size or smaller with the fine side. So now that it's all green, what I do is I'll go back in and make sure that it's nice and wet on just one side, just the area that I'm going to focus the blend on, and then immediately start with the next color. Only in the darkest areas do I, go over it a couple times, go back to the light color, and start dragging it out a little bit further. See, as of now, it's kind of hard to see where that blend is, which is kind of what you want. You don't want to see where that other color ends right away. So you can add in the dark and then just start blending that. Because this is all nice and wet, it just goes right along into the next color. So that way you can just keep working it back and forth. And you see I'm doing, one section of the leaf at a time, just so that I know this is still wet. It's not going to dry out on me, and then you start seeing those lines that, everybody complains about when they use markers. So now that one side's done, I'll go back in and start in the darkest area, because there's going to still be a little bit of the residue from the darker inks on this marker. So you start already in the darkest area where you plan on putting in the darker colors anyway. This way you still keep the brightest parts as bright as possible. This is my favorite marker paper. This is just a little scrap piece that I'm showing you on, that I did a piece for Jay on there. You guys all know who he is. Just get that nice and wet. Then you go in and you add this to about as much as you want. You can keep it lighter, you can keep it darker, you can do however you want to do it, but the blends is what's important. Worried about that's moving the camera. And usually right after I go into that medium color with the dark color, I go right back to the lightest color, because I know that I can drag this out all the way into the light color and not darken any of that really light color that I had already added in there. And that's most of the time what you want. You don't want to end up using that middle color and then making a mark in the lighter area. Alright, well that's just one way. I will show you a couple more in a second. There you go. All right, so here's something that's a little bit harder this way, but obviously you can just go from dark green to a medium green to a light green. Obviously that works, but if you want things just to be a little bit different, and you want to use a blue and a yellow to make a green, you can. I really do suggest having at least a middle tone green. Just because it does make it a little bit easier. And you'll notice is what happens when I do a really wet blue I'm in a really wet yellow, and then with a blue on top of that and drag it out, you know, you'll still see, you know, how that can still blend, but it's just not going to be as clean as you know, as the greens itself. You won't get as smooth of a blend. This is more if you're doing like if you really want it to look like a watercolor kind of piece. You know, so you can see from there it doesn't look as clean, it doesn't look as smooth as you might want it. So you can still keep that blue in there, but you just add the green over it, which will help keep that blend. So that way it looks more like an actual painting versus something that's more cartoony or tattooed like this. Alright, so just in case you want to do a dead flower, a brownish flower, I'm using canary yellow, dark brown, and mineral orange. It's like I said, it's basically the same technique that I use. That I used on the Bonnie Rotten, that I use 95% of the time. There are a whole bunch of other ways I can show you how to use markers for a lot more subtle techniques, but we'll see how this tutorial goes, and if you guys are really interested in stuff like that, I'll do more. Like I said, you just keep the area that, you know, the lightest tone in that area. If you want it to go white, I would suggest still doing it yellow, and then using a white color pencil to go back into it, and I'll show you that this time with this brown side of the leaf, so you can see that. Can add textures to it. You know, you can do all different types of stuff. You know, you don't have to be just flat watercolor style. You know, simple techniques. You know, you can do whatever you want with markers. And just keep in mind that, you know, the wetter it is, the easier it is to get those smooth blends. You know, and sometimes you may not want them smooth. You know, sometimes you might want like a little edge, like I did here. Just so that you can see some of the textures and shapes and stuff like that are actually going on inside, and it doesn't have to look like a flat cartoony colored leaf, you know what I mean? As you can see from there, it like immediately just breaks down the brown and just kind of adds like a darker tone to it. A little bit there, and just blend it out. See how it just went from like a dark brown line that you can clearly see as a line to just being blended right in like as if it was paint, you know. So that way you guys still have your textures, you still have your shapes. It's not just flat like these. Let that dry for a second, and, you know, like with any of these, you can add like a rounded edge. You just take a white colored pencil and do whatever you want with it, because especially when it's a darker tones like the greens and stuff, it just really stands out a lot from that. So with something like this, you would just bring it right from this edge. You know, like if you wanted it to be white, you could just do that. This way it's really makes that leaf pop. You know, stand out, makes it look more three-dimensional, realistic, you know. And then even if with the yellow that's there, if you want it to go to all the way to white from the yellow, you just blend it out. So now you have a leaf that goes from really dark blue to a really nice green to a yellow, all the way to white. go.